My friend Stacy from Stacy Creates Stuff sent one of her quilt tops to me. I get the honor of actually quilting it. She chose just loops and swirls. We're gonna kind of fit them in where they look nice with each of these blocks, since each of our blocks are a little bit different. Good morning, friends. It's another quilting day. Hi, I'm Lauren Weber. I'm the artist and quilter behind Garden Girl Studio, and today I have such an exciting day for us. My friend Stacy from Stacy Creates Stuff sent one of her quilt tops to me. She mailed it out, and it's here. It's arrived. We've chatted it out about how we want to quilt it up, and I get the honor of actually quilting it. So today I'm going to walk you through that process. And if you've been following along with her stitch along on her hole in the barn door project, then you are going to love this vlog, because we are quilting her hole in the barn door quilt. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. So Ellie and I are heading out now, and we're headed over to the quilting studio. Hey everyone, we made it to the quilting studio. I'm here with my long arm, and Stacy's quilt is right behind me. The first thing we need to do is get the quilt ready to go, and we have to get it on the frame and rolled onto rollers. Now, an interesting thing about the quilt that Stacy sent me is she has a pieced back, and pieced backs are fantastic. If you don't have enough fabric to make it across the quilt, then you can use multiple pieces of fabric to make your back into one big piece so that it'll work for the back of your quilt project. As a long arm quilter, I need extra fabric on the length and width and on the sides so that I can have room to maneuver my long arm to attach the backing fabric to the frame without running over my zippers or any of my attachment gears. And so I like to have 4 extra inches on the top, 4 extra inches on the bottom, and on the left and right so that I can take my machine off of the quilt and also do a little test patch to check my tension. So Stacy has been awesome, and she has gotten me extra fabric for the back, and there are strips on the top and the bottom that we're going to try to avoid because it's extra fabric so that I can attach the quilt to my rollers, but we're going to try to not sew through them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to align the quilt so that we are sewing in the middle section of the back, and I'm going to pre-baste it to make sure that we are aligning the quilt between the top border and the bottom border that she added in there just to help me get everything attached to my frame. So if you're not familiar with Stacy's quilt, she has been doing a weekly stitch along. The name of the quilt is a hole in the barn door quilt, and it is fabulous. So it's based off of a barn door quilt, and each block has a different center and a different technique to use to try out different quilting techniques. So if you haven't checked out this stitch along, you need to go head on over there and check it out. I will link her page in the description below so that you can go check out and see if this is a quilt that you want to make, because as you can see behind me, it's colorful, it's beautiful, and of course you can use whatever colors you want, but the blocks are gorgeous and I cannot wait to show you them. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get our machine prepped. I'm going to get our quilt all ready to go on the rollers, and then we will start quilting. Okay, so this is the back side. When we're rolling a piece of fabric onto the quilt, this is the quilt back. So this is the wrong side of the fabric, and this is the strip that we're going to try not to stitch into. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to roll this back just a little bit, and I'm going to baste down the batting just inside this line so that we're not going to be in this row. There's a similar panel like border at the bottom as well. We don't want to stitch into that. I'm going to try to align the quilt right in these middle sections as best I can, and I'm going to pre-baste the entire quilt. And because this quilt isn't huge, it's, you know, it's a lap size quilt, I can pre-baste the whole thing without it causing too much disruption to the quilting process. And this is just going to ensure that we are not quilting in these sections that she doesn't want quilted. I'm going to baste down guidelines for our batting and a guideline so that we can align our quilt, and then I'm going to pre-baste the whole thing so that we can make sure that everything lines up just the way that we want it. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the thread that Stacy chose. This is a fantastic color. This is one of my go-to colors when I am working on a very colorful quilt because it picks up whatever color is underneath it. This is Glide Cool Gray 3. Super popular color. It blends in really nicely when you have a colorful quilt or if you need just a nice neutral. I think it's going to blend throughout the entire quilt top really, really nicely and just accentuate all of her piecing that she did. That's just so gorgeous. Stacy also used a lot of black and white fabrics. So if we had gone with, say, a white thread or a black thread, it might have looked really stark on, throughout the quilt, wherever, on its opposite. So if it was black thread, it would look really stark on the white fabric, or a black thread would have looked really stark on a white fabric. So by using a gray color, it's going to kind of look balanced throughout the whole quilt. So I'm really excited to show you what this is going to look like. Okay, so just a little supplies update. I am using a stretch 90 needle, which works for a lot of different types of fabrics. And we are using Dream 8020 batting, which needles so nicely. I'm so excited. This is a really nice batting. I'm really loving the Dream. It is a just great quality batting if you're ever looking for a nice batting to use for your quilts. So now I'm going to get it all aligned. We're going to base it down and then align our quilt. Okay, so now it's time to add in Stacy's beautiful quilt. I am going to get this quilt straightened and aligned. We're going to base it down between those two outer borders to try to center it in the middle. And hopefully it'll all work out with the placement. If not, we'll move it and we'll rebaste it again. This helps us make sure that we have it in the right spot before we start quilting. So if we pre-baste it, then we know where it's going to be. And normally on a quilt, I will baste as I go, but when I need to align something perfectly within a space, then we want to make sure that we're pre-basting before we start stitching. Okay, so we're at the very end. You can see I'm about to baste down this last part of the border, but I just wanted to show you that we did it. We made it. We were avoiding this strip right at the end of the backing, and there's plenty of room. So the quilt ends here and the border ends here. So we are good to go. But I can't get over just how beautiful this quilt is. Look at these colors, y'all. Look how gorgeous this is. And again, this is a weekly stitch along you can find on Stacy Creates Stuff, her page. I am linking it below. It's a hole in the barn door project. So this is a standard barn door type pattern, but each center block is a little bit different. So you can try a whole bunch of different quilting techniques with her weekly stitch along, and you can use whatever colors you like, but I am personally loving these colors that Stacy chose. How gorgeous is this border and this quilt? So I'm going to go ahead and finish basting, and then we're going to start quilting. The quilting pattern that Stacy chose is an all over. I'm going to be free motion quilting. So this is not like a pattern. I'm not pre-programming my machine. I'm going to be using my hands to guide the machine around. And because a lot of these blocks are angular, I'll move us over to this block. She chose just loops and swirls. We're going to kind of fit them in where they look nice with each of these blocks, since each of our blocks are a little bit different. I'm just going to kind of ease my way in. We said we don't want to quilt too densely, so we're going to try to make sure that we're not too dense. This isn't going to be like a densely custom quilt. This is going to be just kind of a nice loose curves and swirls, so that if she ever wants to use this for a throw quilt or something along those lines, she can feel comfortable. And I'm doing it all over. I have to kind of get into a little bit of a zone to make sure everything kind of stays consistent, because I don't have a pattern I'm following. I'm just doodling on the quilt. So I want to make sure that it all comes out nice and even as best I can. And it's best not to overthink it. But what's nice about the pattern that I'm about to show you with quilting is that you could definitely do something like this on a domestic machine. So if you're following along with Stacy's stitch along and you want to do a similar quilting style, you can definitely adapt this for something other than a long arm. We're just going to be making gentle curves and swirling and looping as we move. Our swirls are going to kind of give us that nice quilted detail, and the loops are going to help us move and progress through the quilt. So we're going to use the loops as kind of our traveling, and these swirls are going to be our details. And when I'm making my swirls, I kind of make them ribbony. They kind of are two-dimensional, so I don't have to worry about always coming back on the same line. They're going to kind of look a little bit more like ribbon swirls. Okay, so we're about to start row 2, and it looks like this row has some English paper piecing. So we'll see, it's going to be a little bit thicker, so we'll see how that needles. So we might have to do a little bit of a looser style around here. But the rest of these appear to be pretty traditionally pieced, so we should be good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on row 2. Okay, it seems to handle that just fine. So we're gonna just keep swimming. Okay, so we've progressed the quilt again. I'm about to start row 3 out of 4. And this row is very interesting because this block right here that I'm hovering over is actually 3-dimensional. So we are not gonna quilt over this square right here at all. We can quilt around it, but we've got to make sure that we don't quilt this down because we want to keep that 3-dimensional quality in the center of this block. In this row, we have applique, which I think is going to quilt out similar to the English paper piecing style section. So I'm not too worried about this, but this is just pretty. I love this block. It's so, so pretty. And again, here we just have some traditional piecing. So we should be good to go. We've just got to be careful of this first block here, not to stitch down and not to catch it on our foot. We don't want to get caught. So we're going to be very mindful of this as we go. And I'm going to pause here just to kind of try to figure out my route. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of swirl into this space, and then we're going to head down and around it, and then I'll come back up on the other side. I think that that's going to be our best bet. So let's attempt that and make sure that we've filled in all of our spaces the way we need to. So here, we're going to swirl. We can add a mini swirl. That's fine. We're going to come down, loop around it. Swirl. Swirl. Here we'll do another loop. Alright. And I think that came out okay. I think we did good. So we're just gonna, we filled in enough space around there, so we're just gonna go ahead and keep going. Okay, we're about to start row 4, and all of these blocks are pieced. So I've kind of gotten into the block a little bit. You can see right up here, I've kind of started stitching down, but we're gonna get into the centers of the blocks. This one's really pretty. I really like this one. And of course, then we have this one here. So these are all pretty traditionally pieced, so they should stitch out just fine. Yeah, but we're at the edge of this quilt. This is row 4, so this is the last row of blocks, and then we just have the little bit of border on the edge, and then we will be getting this quilt into prep mode to ship back to Stacy.
And I'm gonna just baste over. I'm just gonna tack this down a little bit more right here. We're just gonna add a little loop. Okay, so the last thing we need to do, I'm gonna be stitching just right along the edge. I'll show you this first edge here, but I'm going to probably cut camera in order to stitch up the sides because it takes a minute and I have to keep rolling the quilt about every 10 inches or so. But I'll show you what it looks like on this bottom edge, and just know that I'm gonna be stitching a stay stitch basically on this bottom edge, just all the way across, in order to make sure that none of the quilting falls apart and to make it a little bit easier to bind and to cut the quilt out. Okay, I've gone as far as I can, and I'll show you what this project looks like once I'm all finished stitching up the edges. So we finished this quilt. I'm so excited. The only things left to do are to take out the basting stitches, and then we're going to trim out the quilt, double check it over, make sure everything looks nice and good and perfect, and then we're going to send it right on back to Stacy. Thank you so much for following along. I'm so glad that you're here and experiencing this journey with me. Be sure to go check out Stacy's channel because I'm sure she'll give updates on this quilt. She's going to be binding it, so I cannot wait to see what it looks like when it's completely done, when it's all set. Thank you so much, Stacy, for allowing me the honor of working on your quilt, and thank you all so much for following along and for joining me on this adventure. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video. I post a lot of tutorials, vlogs, embroidery, and art quilting videos. So if that's your jam, I would love to have you along for the ride. Until next time, friends, happy stitching.